Visual proof that the Giants are interested in right-handed pitcher out of Japan, Kodai Senga. We'll get to that and Joc Pederson's looming decision next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, a lot to get to. The first thing I want to discuss is, like I said, the visual evidence that the Giants are interested in right-handed pitcher Kodai Senga out of Japan. Someone we haven't talked about a lot on the show, simply because I don't know that much about him, given that he's spent his career in Japan. And but he's not even going to be posted. He's one of these guys. There's no posting fee, and so he's a pure free agent actually. And the visual evidence, courtesy of Marc Delucchi, who covers the Giants for a new SI site, and what he did was took a picture of the Giants scoreboard as he was driving down the freeway. You can see, I know exactly where that is. You can look to your right, and you're kind of high up above the water under the Lefty O'Doul Bridge, and you can see the scoreboard. And so honestly, if anybody is situated in such a location where you can see the Oracle Park scoreboard, this is like the best way to figure out what the Giants are doing and who's in town for a visit. Because what they had on the scoreboard was a picture, a photoshopped image of Kodai Senga on the scoreboard, like wearing a Giants uniform with his name, Kodai Senga, and number 41 drawn out on the scoreboard. So good sleuthing by Mark there, and obviously that means that the Giants are interested. So it's not surprising, like that's the thing. And also I want to discuss these Farhan Zaidi quotes in a Andy Baggerly piece in The Athletic recently, where he essentially said, when you think you're going to sign a player, you're probably not going to sign that player. And he said, if you think you're probably not going to sign the player, you're definitely not going to sign the player. And what this means, I think there's this like common misperception that like, you know what the other teams are out there offering. So like you make your offer, but they're not telling you what the other offers are. And so when you see that, oh, the Giants were, 20 million short on Bryce Harper, well, they're not necessarily being told you're 20 million short on Bryce Harper. They're being told what is your best and final offer. And then they put it out there, and then you find out later what was being offered. And so I'm not surprised. Like they're out there, Kodai Senga, probably a lot of the top pitchers that are out there in the market are probably targets for the Giants. And they just, it's doing their due diligence to kind of check in with all of them and make a pitch. Now, for Senga, though, what would they be getting? Obviously, there is a potential hole in the rotation with Carlos Rodón potentially leaving, and Senga would theoretically perhaps replace that spot in the rotation. They certainly would view him as a starter, I would imagine, because the predicted contracts, the median predicted contract by MLB Trade Rumors, ESPN, and Fangraphs is 5 years, $72 million total. So $14.4 million per year is the median average annual value. And the the ESPN write-up by Kylie McDaniel, who is a scout by trade. So I thought that his write-up was perhaps the most relevant to read here. He says, Senga is one of the best pitchers in Japan. He showcases a plus fastball, often in the upper 90s, and a plus splitter in a power pitcher mold. His breaking stuff is just okay, so he isn't a shoe-in frontline starter and might fit better in shorter stints or as a starter with a quick hook. But most clubs see him as somewhere from a second to fourth starter. Given his age, command, and breaking ball concerns, it's reasonable to expect a number 3 starter, but with more risk slash reward slash variance than other 30-year-old starters, like the next pitcher on the list, who's Taijuan Walker. Senga opted out of his contract in Japan and is a free agent, so he's not subject to posting rules. This means a $10 to $15 million fee that would have gone to his team will just be included in his contract. So the prediction by Kylie McDaniel here, by the way, is 5 years, $72 million, with that exact median average annual value of $14.4 million. So, I mean, when I hear upper 90s fastball plus splitter, and when I mean a plus meaning above average and above average fastball, above average splitter, I immediately think of Kevin Gausman, right? That's who comes to mind, with just an okay breaking ball. So perhaps Senga represents a middle road that we hadn't necessarily been exploring a lot on the show, where you've got Carlos Rodón also going to probably command 5 years. We don't know for sure what either will command, but 5 years, maybe more like 130, 140 million, which this would be about half of that. And then you've got your short-term guys like DeGrom and Verlander, who will command fewer years, 2, maybe 3 years, but we're talking like $40+ million per year. And so for Senga, perhaps it's a risk worth taking, because the risk is that there's less to go off of, right? You're looking at Japanese stats as opposed to a major league track record. But at the same time, when I read this write-up on him, I have never really seen him pitch. I've seen some highlights on YouTube, but it's hard for me to like say, yes, go get him. I don't know. It depends on their internal evaluation. Obviously, that internal evaluation was significant enough to at least put a graphic on the scoreboard, which suggests he was either there at the time or that they were preparing to have him come in. And so, look, probably 10, 15 teams are interested in this guy. And so it's not surprising that the Giants are one of them. They're doing their due diligence on all kinds of players, but he is an intriguing starting pitcher that we hadn't talked about much, simply because I didn't know much about him. But this has kind of forced me to dive in. And when we read the write-up here, it's pretty intriguing. And I mean, upper 90s fastball and a plus splitter. I mean, that I'm hearing it's like a Kevin Gausman with an even more firm fastball is what I kind of hear when I look at that. And the Giants have had great success with kind of getting the most out of pitchers. And so if they ended up with him and it was at this kind of level of a contract, it would mean to me that they really believe in him being able to reach that top potential in terms of like number 2 starter type potential versus number 4 starter, which was also written in this write-up here. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to get to the impending decision by Joc Pederson. That decision may have even been made by the time you're listening to this. We'll preview what is at stake here and more in just a minute. But before we do, betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. I know that it's mine. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at BetOnline, including the Major League Baseball offseason. I've actually switched the sign over my shoulder here to say, again, Aaron Judge season. I've come back around on Aaron Judge after reading an article in The Athletic, but BetOnline is all over this, saying that the Giants, if Judge were to leave the Yankees, the Giants are that top threat to lure him away. And initially when they put out their odds, they had the Giants like 9th most likely to land Judge if he left the Yankees. And we talked about how that was a great opportunity to bet on that if you had the chance. They also put out contract odds. The over-under was $375 million. I said slam the under on that, and that's probably going to prove to be correct. So we'll be doing that all offseason long. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, as promised, we are going to discuss the impending decision due by Joc Pederson. Joc Pederson was given the $19.65 million qualifying offer, and his decision on whether to accept it or reject it is due today. And by the time you're listening to this, you may already know the answer. Thanks again, by the way, for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, wait, that's the wrong line there. What I'm trying to say is, once again, we're going to talk about Joc Pederson and the impending decision he has to make. Now, ultimately, if I had to guess as to what he's going to do, I think he's going to accept the Giants' $19.65 million qualifying offer. I don't think it's necessarily a slam dunk, but I would definitely lean towards it, like 90%. He accepts it, 10% he rejects it. The only reason he would reject it, to me, is if he's getting multiple year interest. Like, he's not going to get that kind of average annual value over multiple years. But what he could potentially get is more guaranteed money. So I've used this example before, but say, other teams, because he's allowed to talk to other teams throughout this whole time. He could have been talking to other teams after the Giants gave him the qualifying offer. And that's the point, is that you get the qualifying offer and you're given some time to gauge interest from other teams to see if it's worth accepting or not. So say some teams are expressing interest, and perhaps you get the sense, if you're Joc Pederson's camp, that you could perhaps get like $36 million guaranteed over 3 years. Let's just say, I've been saying 36 to 39, perhaps, just as a guess, right? Like, we don't know for sure. Maybe there's 2-year interest only. Maybe it's 4 years, something crazy. But then the longer you go, the less the AAV would be, but it's more guaranteed money. But let's just say it's 36. The Giants are essentially offering him 20 for 1 year. So if you were to think about taking a $36 million 3-year offer, it's $16 million more guaranteed money. But if you take the $20 million for 1 year, you're only guaranteed $20 million, but you get to re-enter the market next year. You can't be given a qualifying offer again. And the question would be, if you're Pederson, do I think I can make 16 or more million dollars over the next couple of years if I accept the qualifying offer? And I think he could, but also I can see how it would be tempting to just guarantee yourself the most money. Like, that's the question. Do I just cash in now and get the most possible guaranteed dollars, or do I take a really high average annual value on a 1-year deal and have to prove myself again? That must be kind of tiring for Joc Pederson, because if he accepts the qualifying offer, this would be his 3rd straight 1-year deal. So no security at all. Just every year, prove it and then go re-enter the market. A lot is made over the fact that this would be a huge raise, more than 3 times from his $6 million salary in 2022. But the fact is that $6 million salary was just about the lowest point of value he possibly could have had, right? Like, before the last couple years, when he was consistently a really good player with the Dodgers, Dan Szymborski said that if he had reached free agency after his 2019 season, as opposed to after his 2020 season, which again, obviously was a 60-game season, but if he had reached free agency after 2019, Dan Szymborski of the Zips projection system, who writes at Fangraphs, has said he would have been in line for roughly, I think it was like 4 years, $80 million. And so to get him just a couple years after that, for 1 year, $6 million, speaks less to like he's just a $6 million a year player, and more to his value tanked quite a bit over a couple of years. But this year he kind of went back to being the type of guy he was with the Dodgers for all those years. Defense was a little bit worse, offense was a little bit better. But anyway, I just think it's a lot over 1 year, but it is just 1 year. And so it is a decision to make, but ultimately I think it's going to be too hard to pass up that kind of money over 1 year, because say he has a good year and say he feels like he's going to be able to improve a little bit defensively, he could perhaps, if he goes out there and has a strong season, be in line for a multiple year deal he could make that 3 year, $36 million after this year, in which he's making $20 million. So anyway, it could end up being a better option for him, and we're going to know soon. And again, I lean towards that Joc Pederson will accept the qualifying offer. The Giants also today have to set their 40-man rosters ahead of the Rule 5 draft. And so any players who are not added who are Rule 5 eligible will be eligible to be taken in the Rule 5 draft. And so guys like Marco Luciano, Luis Matos, and many others, Hunter Bishop, they have to make the call as to whether or not to add them to the 40-man roster today. Some of them are easy calls, especially like Luciano. There's just no way they don't protect him here. But, their 40-man roster is currently full. And so in order to add these guys, they're going to have to make corresponding moves. They're going to have to DFA some guys. This is a possibility that it triggers some trades throughout the league today. So it's a big day, and coming up tomorrow, we're going to discuss all of the outcomes here, including, Pederson and all the 40-man moves that the Giants make. So coming up in just a minute, as I said, Aaron Judge is over my left shoulder here on YouTube. I've got a sign saying Aaron Judge season because the Giants perhaps are in a position to actually land a player like Aaron Judge. But what if they don't get him? Are these two left-handed hitters that are mentioned in this mailbag question reasonable alternatives in the outfield for Aaron Judge? So we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do, all right, as promised, some mailbag questions. The first one coming from Garrett, who says, in the event that Judge is unobtainable, how would you feel about someone like Joey Gallo or Michael Conforto joining the team? Personally, I've always loved Gallo's game and would be all about seeing him track down balls in right field and crush them into the cove. So I would imagine Joey Gallo is going to be kind of polarizing. Like you say that you love Gallo's game. I think a lot of people would hate Joey Gallo's game here. The issue is the strikeouts. His career strikeout rate is 37.3%. This year it was 39.8%. He's kind of like Joey Bart level strikeout machine, but kind of what we hope Bart will do in terms of when he's not striking out, he's impacting the baseball. He's got a career 270 ISO, which is just exceptional. His career batting average is 199, but he's got a 325 on base because he walks a ton. He's got a 469 slugging, which is even more impressive when you consider slugging is influenced by batting average, and so that's where the isolated power, which is slugging minus batting average, is more of an indicator. He's got, tons of power, and he walks. He's either going to hit you a home run, strike out, or walk. He's the three true outcomes player. He's been good defensively for the most part in his career. It looks to me, just kind of glancing through some of the numbers, that perhaps there's some decline going on in the outfield, or perhaps it's just a kind of blip. He is only 28 years old. He turns 29 actually in 4 days. So, yeah, he's relatively young when we look at the free agent class. He's certainly, like, if you go, okay, we're going to get Judge. No, we're not. We're getting Joey Gallo. It is a huge, huge step down from Judge to Gallo. So it's not like, if they missed out on a Judge and they wanted Judge, they've got to pivot to like, what's his name? Carlos Correa or Trey Turner or somebody like that. Joey Gallo would be like, okay, we've got spots to fill in our outfield. And, there's also Nimmo, but besides Judge and Nimmo, there's a pretty significant drop off in terms of the outfield talent. Perhaps all the more reason that they gave the qualifying offer to Joc Pederson. I know some of you are saying, no, he's just a DH, but I think even if you're like mostly a DH, he would see some time in the outfield. And prior to 2022, he wasn't terrible. He was more average than terrible. And so I think they could get him back there. But Conforto is also an interesting guy. I liked Michael Conforto quite a bit last offseason, but he never ended up signing a deal. He had this shoulder injury, right? It was he had a shoulder injury in the offseason, and he also had the qualifying offer attached to him, and nobody signed him. And so he didn't play for a year, but he's a quality player, and I could definitely see him being someone of interest. If we're talking about outfielders, yeah, there's Judge, there's Nimmo, there's Gallo, Conforto, and I, under the radar, kind of like Kevin Kiermaier a little bit. Again, it would be like a second tier type signing. I'm not saying pivot from Judge to Kiermaier and call it a day. I'm saying Kiermaier could potentially be a piece of the puzzle. And then there's Cody Bellinger, might get non-tendered by the Dodgers. If you're someone like Bellinger, though, why would you want to come to the Giants? Because you're trying to rebuild value. And the Giants are not a great place to hit as a left-handed hitter in particular. And so if you're trying to reestablish value, why would you come to Oracle Park of all places? So I don't see Bellinger being at all likely. And a lot of these guys, that was part of what was really interesting is an Andrew Baggarly piece in The Athletic. It was from like November 9th, and I just got around to seeing it yesterday. But some really eye-opening comments by Farhan Zaidi about essentially that San Francisco is a polarizing place among players, and that there are some players who not only don't want to play for you, but don't even like coming here for 3-game series, is what he said. So that's interesting. And, you just don't know who those players are unless you really dig in. And that's part of why Aaron Judge is so intriguing, because it's pretty rare to have like a superstar talent who you just pretty much know for a fact would have some level of interest in playing for you. I mean, he recently did an interview with John Shea in the San Francisco Chronicle, essentially saying, he just flat out said it was his childhood dream to play for the San Francisco Giants. And so he grew up a huge Giants fan. Rich Aurelia was his favorite player. He stayed up late watching Barry Bonds chase the home run record. He's one of us. And so, there's obviously some degree of interest, but among other players, for various reasons, whether it's political or, Seiya Suzuki, this is again mentioned by Baggarly from Japan, right? He last year was seemingly a target of the Giants, but I don't remember if he flat out said it or if it was sources to Baggarly. It came out that Seiya Suzuki didn't want to sign with the Giants because he had seen in the media in Japan stories about crime and homelessness in San Francisco. And so stuff like that, like we kind of sleep on as factors here. I know I'm going off the rails on your question a little bit, but we just don't know who among these players would have interest in playing for the Giants. And for Judge, while, the last several years of a huge deal might not look good, the first several might look fantastic, and it might be worth it for a team that is desperately in need of the talent, desperately in need of the fan interest, desperately in need of a face of the franchise. And Judge just might be the guy. And we keep hearing that the interest is legitimate. They know what it's going to take, and that they're going to be all in. And so that's going to be fascinating to see. And, decisions need to be made, and it starts today with Joc Pederson. And also I've kind of drawn out some possible lineups, even if you bring in a guy like Judge, and it's kind of lacking with impact left-handed bats in that lineup. The left-handed bats are what? Mike Yastrzemski and Lamont Wade Jr., Luis Gonzalez. It's just really not that scary of a possible lineup. Brandon Crawford, that's pretty much it. And so a guy like Pederson really could do wonders for kind of solidifying the left-handed impact bats in your lineup. And so I hope Pederson does come back. And the only reason the only reason it would be like a problem to give Pederson the qualifying offer is if it stops them from doing other things. And so we won't know until the offseason is over, but I'm assuming that they're not going to let the money they spend on Pederson deter them from spending money in other areas aggressively. But if it does, that's a problem. But if it doesn't, then who cares? It's not our money. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. It's like the sports page in podcast form now, with the local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Really fantastic. So check it out. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a lot. So thanks in advance. And thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. We're going to be wrapping up a busy day of activity from today. So thanks again for listening. See you then. You are now Locked On Giants.